Since their exodus out of Egypt, the Jews have wandered through lands, countries, and continents, emerging as history's ultimate nomads. Jewish communities have for centuries been prone to appear, disappear, and reappear almost anywhere, belonging everywhere and yet nowhere.
I only know two like this one in Portugal, one in Évora and the other one in the public library of Lisboa. Very similar, also with this this container where we can read Shema Israel. Okay? These kino talk about the expulsion from Spain and the arrival of Portugal. Chorai comigo, desterrados e desgraçados filhos, a horrorosa expulsão de Castela. Dor, sim, remédios lá padecerão nossos irmãos, infâmias e sacrilégios, barbaridades inumanas, castigos e tormentos. Executaram os castelhanos nos pobres judeus fugitivos, matando nos braços da mãe os inocentes filhos. Em Touro massacraram grandes e pequenos. Da fatal lembrança todos trememos. Seja por perdão de pecados estes castigos. Guai de nós.
In 1492, more than 100,000 Jewish refugees expelled from Spain crossed the border to Portugal near the villages of Castelo de Vide and Marvão. King João II granted them entry in return for a tax paid per head. But it took just 5 years for the tragedy that caused their expulsion from Spain to repeat itself in Portugal.
Faz 20 anos e dia que andamos nas ondas do mar, botando solas de molhotolina para de noite jantar.
Behind me, you see the village of Marvão in the top of the hill. Behind that hill is the little village, Valencia de Alcântara and Albuquerque in Spain, from where the Jewish community was expelled. They must have passed through the road crossing Marvão and in direction from Castelo de Vide on the way to the customs tower, where the people were taxed to enter. So this was really what we can call the frontier.
Yo me levantaría un lunes por la mañanita, tomara yo mi cantarrito y a la fuente fuera por agua.
I have just next to me 2 gravestones from the Middle Ages, probably still from the 14th century or beginning of the 15th century, and found in the graveyard of Marvão. You can see it, the menorah inscription on it. The oldest example is in Mértola, South Portugal. That is a gravestone from the 5th century, and it's for the Iberian Peninsula. Until now, the oldest testimony of the presence of the Jewish community, or the Jew at least, in Portugal.
Since the establishment of the Kingdom of Portugal in the 12th century, the Crown recognized the Jewish community as a distinct legal entity with its own jurisdiction, with the community's rabbi serving as the administrative and legal authority of the community. Jews lived in separate quarters but were free to travel within the country. They were considered to be the property of the king, a fact that earned them protection. The Jews became a major part of the intellectual and economic elite of the country, and many were employed as physicians and astronomers, as well as royal treasurers, tax collectors and advisors to the king.
We are at one of the entrances of the latest Jewish quarter from Alfama. We call it Juderia. As we can see above the city wall, we still find the house said to be the house of the rabbi. If we see the size of the house, we could see that it was an important rabbi, and we could also understand the importance and the dimension of the community in Lisbon.
In the 13th and 14th centuries, known as Portugal's golden age of discoveries, Jews were involved in all aspects of the explorations, from financing the sailing fleets to making scientific discoveries in the fields of mathematics, medicine and cartography. Most famous was Abraham Zacuto, who wrote the tables that provided the basis for Portuguese navigation. But in 1496, 4 years after the Jews were expelled from Spain, a political maneuver taken by King Manuel had a destructive impact on the Jewish community of Portugal.
King Manuel was to be married with Queen Maria, daughter of the Catholic kings. And one of the points in the marriage agreement that we should also expel the Jews. Now, that was not for our interest. The Jews were involved in the commerce, the Jews were involved in the trades, the Jews were involved in the discoveries, in the cartography, in the mathematics, so we didn't want to expel them. But in the same time, we need to have a marriage that could guarantee that it would not exist a war with Spain. Spain has just unified their kingdom. Now, if you make a marriage, you can secure your frontiers. And the strategical movement was, at the time, much more important than the Jewish community.
After the marriage contract was signed on December the 5th, 1496, the king issued a decree forcing all Jews to leave Portugal by October 1497. But as thousands of Jews gathered at the port of Lisbon to prepare for departure, the boats that were supposed to take them never arrived. Instead, they were herded into a courtyard close to the present-day Commerce Square, where they were baptized by force. After being sprinkled with baptismal waters, they were all declared new Christians. A delegate sent by King Manuel to the Catholic kings declared, "There are no more Jews in Portugal."
We are in front of the Church of Conceição Velha. It was built with the money raised from the belongings confiscated to the synagogue and over the site of the synagogue.
As was the case in Spain, many of the new Christians became a target of the Inquisition that focused its efforts on rooting out converts from other faiths found to be infidel to the new Christian faith.
What was today, and since the 19th century, the National Theatre was before the Holy Inquisition headquarters and prison. If you put a washed shirt on a Saturday, that means that probably you are a Jew because you are honoring the Shabbat. Or if you refuse to eat pork, for instance. Well, if you don't want to eat pork, you are a Jew. The accusations to our 21st century standards are really sometimes ridiculous. They charge always the new Christians because all the Jews were converted or by force or by will. And for 20 years it was not allowed even to ask somebody if he had been Jew before. So they presume that there are no Jews in Portugal. Everybody is Roman Christians. And they were accused of not following the rules from the Roman Christian Church. You have the Inquisition of Évora, the Inquisition of Coimbra, the Inquisition of Lisbon, and the Inquisition of Goa in India. But the Inquisition of Lisbon, all of the condemned have passed through this church.
Salafado, como sei, tive poema cantado e fado que eu inventei a falar. Não posso dar-me, mas ponho a alma a cantar. As almas sabem escutar-me. Chorai, chorai, poetas do meu país, troncos da mesma raiz da vida nos juntou.
The Street of the Coin is a name that some people relate with Jews because Jews generally are related to coins and bank and so on. But the medieval name, it was the Street of Tinhoso. Tinhoso is an illness of dogs, very contagious. You can see by this name how Christian consider the Jewish minority and the Jewish community. We are right near one of the entrances of the medieval synagogue, the biggest synagogue of Évora. There's also a small testimony of Jewish presence. This mark here for putting Shema Israel. Many Jews lived here. They built their mezuzot. They put their Shema Israel. And some houses were destroyed. And after we lived here, reused those stones. Reused them to make stairs. And what he's filming is really the remaining of the entrance of a Jewish house, of this Jewish quarter. Jewish archaeological testimonies and Jewish patrimony, we cannot see it immediately as Roman temples, as Islamic houses, Visigothic as medieval structure, because Jews were persecuted and were expelled and were very bad considered. So many of that patrimony, material patrimony, was destroyed and reused.
Todos os dias o vejo na sege passar por aqui, cavalheiro de tão lindas partes como Verbigracia, Londres e Paris.
We have in the old medieval Jewish quarter from Castel de Vide, and his synagogue that is behind me is the oldest Jewish quarter, the oldest synagogue in Portugal and perhaps in Spain and in Europe, well preserved. And it has its origins mainly in the Spanish Jews that were expelled in 1942. The Jewish community settled more in Castel de Vide, probably due to family connections, due to a tradition of commerce, because always has been a commerce across the border in both directions. Eventually what happened to the community, I think a part of it, and very probably the smallest part of it, have lived and tried to reach Lisbon or tried to reach some sea harbor, to try to reach other countries like Morocco or Algeria and run away. But I think a big part of it took baptism and get as crypto Jews underground, as new Christians. Perhaps the most known figure that have lived in Castel de Vide. Originally, the family was from Albuquerque and Valencia de Alcántara in Spain. He was already born in Castel de Vide, that is Garcia Dorta, the greatest botanist from the 16th, 17th century. Later, his family was persecuted and his sister was burned in Goa, accused of being Jewish. We still can see the presence of the Jewish people in these Jewish quarters. If you look at the door gates, the doorways, you see very often an engraving, a sleeve that was destined for the mezuzah. And very often we see it also transformed, not in this case, but transformed in a cross. They put a new arm to the mezuzah engraving, and then they became Christians, or let's say to show around that they were becoming new Christians, that they were no more Jews. Some centuries later, in 1989, our former president of the Republic, Mário Soares, have asked him formally excuses for the crimes that we have done against the Jewish community and for the intolerance during the Inquisition years that have destroyed a part of our cultural heritage from the past. The expulsion of the Jewish community from Portugal, I think it was a disaster in several senses. In the sense that it destroyed all commercial network that where they were fundamentals. Mainly we had very important scientists in Portugal as astronomers, medical doctors, botanics, pharmacists, teachers in university. All that left Portugal, and they took with them the knowledge to some other country. The other countries have benefited from it, like England, like Holland, even in Belgium, Antwerp. They flourished afterwards, and we declined. And later on, even the censorship that the Inquisition brought to this country, the people start censoring, making an auto-censor in what they would write or read, or of what they thought.
In the beginning, this building was a space for the teaching of the arts in the 16th century. But after that, through the 16th century onwards till the 19th century, it became the opposite space, a place for terror and death, the space of the Inquisition. So the Inquisition, this was the headquarters of the Inquisition. Inquisition was a kind of an arm from the Catholic Church that was there in order to make sure that the ideas the Catholic Church wanted to impose were imposed in fact. And we can always imagine that Any member of this Jewish community that was persecuted can always imagine that he actually lived here in one of those cells. The title of the work is Come Closer, Listen to Me. We are invited to get closer to it, try to listen. We are mentally imagining how it would be to survive, try to survive here.
Though officially Jews no longer existed in Portugal, they were evidently present in cultural and intellectual life. They continued their significant contribution to Portuguese culture as new Christians.
After the expulsion, till the end of the Inquisition, all over the history of the university, you see converted Jews in the university. Pedro Nunes, Garcia da Horta, Ribeiro Sanches, persons who were very important to the cultural Portuguese culture and European culture in the 16th century, 17th century. Pedro Nunes, which was a very important mathematician, the most important moments of his life and the most important moments of his knowledge, the discovery of the non-use, the most important discovery he did because it helps the navigation, it helps to localizate the boats in the seas. That discovery was made in Coimbra for sure, in this university. Maybe it told us about that in this room.
Pedro Nunes is maybe still the most important mathematician we ever have in Portugal. Some tools he designed were used up to the 19th century, always being perfected, of course, but they were still in use until very recently. Mainly in the 16th century, our most important thinkers and scientists were Jewish. People that were Jewish or new Christians, they are appearing every time during all the cultural life of the university. So they were still around, they were here all the time. The most precious Bible we have is this one that was written originally in Lisbon. I think it might be around 1460. It's a rare finding. Possessing anything that had Hebrew script on it was very dangerous for people. So they all disappeared, most of them disappeared, and particularly in the Iberian Peninsula, they are very, very rare.
Tomar has been the headquarters of the Knights of the Templars. In Tomar, we can find one of the oldest existing synagogues in Portugal. It has been closed for centuries, but in 1984 it was officially granted to a commission who converted the site into a museum, the Abraham Zacuto Museum. Luis, an ex-New Christian who returned to Judaism, is one of only 2 Jewish families living in Tomar and the devoted guardian of the synagogue.
After the expulsion from Portugal, all the synagogues usually was used as a prison, Christian church. This one was a prison since 1516 till 1542, 1550. And after that, here in 1600, more or less was a Catholic church till 1800, was more years Catholic church than synagogue. After that, in 1885, was a hayloft to put the straw to the animals. In 1992, we organized the first Yom Kippur after 500 years. The Sefer Torah came from London, the Babysmark Synagogue, the Portuguese synagogue in London, came two rabbis, one from Tangier, another from Gibraltar. was a historical day. All the magazines, television, newspapers made big reportages about our Yom Kippur. Yeah. Because the Sefer Torah came in procession on the streets. Everybody wants come to see our Yom Kippur.
Although the Inquisition was abolished in 1821, Portugal decided already in 1800 to invite Jews back into the country. Shortly after, the Gates of Hope Synagogue was built in Lisbon. However, the synagogue was not allowed to face onto the street.
The founders of this community came from Morocco and Gibraltar in the beginning of the 19th century. During the 19th century, Jewish people were not recognized as a community, but they organized themselves as Jews, creating room prayers and also benefice associations. And only in 1910, with the Republican Revolution, with the separation between state and religion, it was possible to recognize the Jewish community like a legal organization. This cemetery is unique because it's the oldest Jewish cemetery that still remains after the expulsion and after the Inquisition. And we have, for example, here the oldest tomb from 1804. Almost all the names are from Morocco because they are the founders of our community. And almost all these names, they are not anymore in our lists of members of our community. Because life, it's like that. You know, sometimes the very well succeeds integration makes the assimilation. It's like that, it's life like that. But for us it's very special because our community starts here.
Mi kamocha ben kamocha, mi kamocha ben domelecha, el Elohim Adonai, Ramal Koramim, Shochem Meonai.
Some historians claim that in 1497, and before they were forced to convert, Jews made up 1/5 of the total Portuguese population. Though the present Jewish community of Portugal is one of the smallest in the world, in many Portuguese veins runs Jewish blood.